we have a motion to go into conference on our bipartisan Iran sanctions bill. The clock keeps ticking, and Iran keeps spinning their centrifuges, and we still trying to work out a deal with Russia and China. Shame on us. So we finally have this motion on the floor today, so you'll excuse me in just a few minutes. But I think that this center does such incredible work, and one of the things that I always come away with when I look at what's going on in foreign policy is that with this administration, it is better to be a belligerent enemy of the United States than a cooperative, close ally. When you look at Syria, a country that sponsors terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, what is our response to Syria? We sent them an ambassador, U.S. ambassador, for the first time in 5 years. And Israel, a close, true ally, democratic ally of the Middle East, ally of our interests and our concerns. What do we do with Israel? We tell them to not build a condominium in Jerusalem, as if that is the single block that is stopping Middle East peace process. So, and we've seen what happens with the free trade agreements with Colombia and Panama. Can we get better allies than those two countries? Having been there just recently, we've got not only two wonderful presidents, but a wonderful people who are loyal to the United States, very patriotic, love the United States in spite of the shabby treatment that we give them. And look at what happened in Honduras. That was unbelievable what the Honduran people had to put up with from the United States. We called it a coup, even though they went by their constitution. They went by the Supreme Court decision. They abided by their rules, their laws, and the Micheletti government and the people of Honduras stood with us in spite of the fact that we yanked their aid, anti-narcotics aid, that would really is the wrong type of aid to yank to a poor country like Honduras. And we took away their visas. And still, to this day, many of members who were helpful in getting rid of Zelaya, a despot, and bringing democracy back to Honduras, have still had their visas revoked. So that's how we treat Colombia, Panama, Honduras. And then you look at what's happening now, just today, these past few days, in Nicaragua, just like Zelaya got away with what he was trying to do. Daniel Ortega is refurbishing again, shining up his Sandinista medals, and is beating up the people who are crying out for true democracy and freedom in the country of Honduras, of Nicaragua. So I thank this wonderful center because you always are bringing truth to what is going on in Latin America, the growing Iranian influence throughout the hemisphere, the flights that take place all the time between Tehran and Caracas should be a worry to anyone who cares deeply about our national security. So I thank the center for what you're doing, but in spite of the brilliance of Nancy and Frank, I've got to admit that the real reason that I'm here is Lee Cohen. He's your secret weapon to always get me to these events. We call him Ray. It's an inside Greek joke. Así que muchísimas gracias. Para mí es un placer estar con ustedes en este día y es muy importante todos los tópicos que van a tocar porque sin duda tenemos unos buenos amigos en Centroamérica y Suramérica, unos amigos que estamos abandonándonos y como dijo Nancy, están ahí los otros países como China y Rusia que sí están tratando de expandir la influencia de ellos y obviamente para nosotros el gran problema es el crecimiento de Irán y la influencia que están teniendo no solamente en Venezuela, que eso es bien conocido, sino en todos los otros países de Latinoamérica. Así que gracias por la oportunidad. Thank you so much, Frank and Nancy and Brian, for this opportunity. Muchísimas gracias. Buenos días.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Good luck and Godspeed on your resolution. We appreciate very much you taking a few minutes to join us and for those words, particularly the ones in Spanish that I must say I didn't understand, but I know were heartfelt and appropriate. Congressman Bilbray, Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen has mentioned, is also a man deeply committed to our understanding of and addressing of the problems south of our border, not least because of his very close scrutiny of what's happening on the border insofar as he represents the 50th District of California and has a personal history of living in immediate proximity to the border. This is a question not only of immigration and the implications of the dynamics of the turmoil in Latin America having for our flows of illegal and other aliens across our southern border. He is the chairman of the Immigration Reform Caucus in the House, as well as a member of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform here in the House, and deeply, deeply involved in the debates that we will be hopefully contributing to in the course of the program today. Congressman Bilbray, again, thank you for your sponsorship of this event and for joining us for a few minutes. It was great to have you on our radio show of Secure Freedom Radio yesterday, and sort of got a bit of a sense of the passion that you bring to this, and it's an appropriate scene setter for what we'll be doing this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Ileana, thank you very much for your leadership in the committee. I know you have to run to move that agenda, so please leave it at your leisure. And let me just say, as somebody who literally grew up about 2 miles from Avenue de Revolution, you know, in my high school, there you didn't worry about the drinking age in the United States. You just had to figure out how to catch a ride over to San Isidro. But growing up with one foot on either side of the border, not just because the surf was better in Baja, but because our friends, the people I went to school with, were on both sides. It just really frustrates me the lack of perception awareness the American people have of anything south of the border. The entire blind spot we have when it comes to Latin America just is so frustrating. I mean, people can tell you the history of you know, the demise of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. They can talk to, you know, you can talk about how Bismarck did this, but if you ask them, when did Boulevard make his move, where was he, where was going on, what happened, I always have to chuckle. I hate to say this when I hear somebody talking about Cinco de Mayo as being Independence Day in Mexico, and it just boggles my mind that that type of ignorance is actually perpetuated in our culture. Not that it doesn't sell Corona beers, but anybody who's ever drank real Mexican beer know how bad that stuff is. The frustration is, this is not just an annoyance, this ignorance of of the Latin American background. It is a major threat to our community, and I see it as the greatest challenge that we have if we really want to talk about our grandchildren. What happens in Asia, what happens in Europe, what happens in Africa gets 100 times more attention than what happens in our own backyard. And it is almost like the old saying that if you want to hide something from someone, set it right in front of them because they'll look right over it. And it frustrates me to see the kind of situations that go on with the total lack of awareness. If you ask the average American, why isn't the Shining Path included in the terrorist groups? Well, nobody wants to bother about it. And when you talk about why in the world with the United States stiff-arm, it's one of its closest allies anywhere around the world. We may not have been the parent of the country of Panama, but we were darn well the midwife. And for us to stiff-arm a nation that is that bonded to the American people in history, in culture, in economic bounds, just blows my mind. And it's so frustrating down the line. And when we see the kind of ignoring issues, classic is how many Americans know that there was talk of, the whole issue of moving tanks to the border between Colombia and Venezuela, the actions of aggressive actions taken by one country against another country in our own hemisphere, and most Americans don't even know about or even care about it. That just really frustrates me when we get down. And then the issue in Honduras, I'm sorry, but there was a classic example where we preach and preach and preach that the politics of personality must be replaced with the politics of constitutional law. And you finally get a community, a nation that stands up for constitutional law. And we literally backhand them for doing it. We insult them, we attack them. To this day, we're still going at that. And I was embarrassed as an American. I hate to say that. I don't say that very often. I'm a son of an immigrant. But I was embarrassed as an American to see how we treated the Honduras during this issue. They stood up for constitutional law. They stood up to make this clear. And it was a young congressman from Illinois that really was kind of interesting about this when they said they weren't going to, the administration said it wasn't going to recognize the election unless the previous executive was put back into office during that election. And the congressman from Illinois, the young congressman said, "Does that mean that in Illinois, the federal government's not going to recognize our elections unless the governor gets reinstated into the position of executive branch?" And it really just showed the hypocrisy of the administration on this issue. And it's not just this administration. It is really a real blind side, if not blatant ignorance, of Latin America that frustrates me. So those of us that think we're so sophisticated, and I understand, I know enough that I know there's a whole lot of things I don't know. But I think there's too many people in positions of power, influence, across the board that are not smart enough to know what they don't know. They don't even perceive their ignorance. And that's, you can talk about the media that was hand-fed propaganda from down south. You can talk about the political process that followed that misinformation. And then you talk about all these other issues that get down to it where, you know, common sense will say, these are the people we should be embracing. These are hemispheric family members, and we should address that because the threat coming out of our southern region is many times more of a threat than what we see from the Far East, Africa, or from Europe. And I just think that it's time we start talking about that. I think the fact that a lot of the problems that have originated in Latin America are now in our neighborhoods across the board, and they're not just one, it's a multiple ones, that the American community is being aware of those and become more sensitive to the fact that they can see now in their neighborhoods the problems that have not been addressed on our southern frontiers or with our southern friends. That now is helping to bring the issue along from the American people point of view. The trouble is the powers that be, political, media, economic, they tend to be way behind the American people on this issue. And I think you're going to see more and more American people are saying, why aren't we taking care of a lot of that issue? Let me just say one thing, though. There are great heroes out there. I think that when we take a look at what happened in Honduras, you had not only people that were willing to stand up, people that were literally saying, do we need to stockpile 8 months or 10 months or a year of food? You're talking about a nation that was looking to be starved out by the international community, including the United States. That is a sad thing that they're at that because they stood up to the constitutional concept that the Supreme Court had impeached their president. Now, you can imagine if that would have been the issue that the world community was talking about doing that to us because we started a process against Richard Nixon. The same time, though, there were heroes in here, and I want to give a plug for it. When the election came through in Honduras, there was the real hero was not the president who got elected, but the guy who lost. And I think that we all recognize that Mr. Santos stood up, and he did more than almost anyone else at being able to make it clear to the world what the real issue was when he accepted the free and open election. And I think that he's going to go down in history in Honduras as being the guy who was at the right place at the right time with the right attitude. Now, sadly, we go over to the other challenges that we have where we can talk about the other hero in this thing. And that is the flip side of the Celaya issue was a gentleman who is more popular than anybody else, who's done more for his country than we've seen in decades, if not centuries, standing up and taking on the drug cartels and the terrorists in Colombia. Everybody wants him to stay. Everybody is begging him to stay. He was willing to stay, but the Supreme Court interpreted the Constitution, and as the great patriot he is, he accepted the constitutional limitations, and no matter how much the public or he wanted him to continue, the Constitution rule. And in Colombia, they have shown exactly how it's be done. And I think that these two countries have shown other countries who are in crisis just exactly how to get the job done. And this may seem abstract when we talk about in the realm of security, but this is the foundation of security, of constitutional legal process, of governing from the book, not from the barrel of a gun. And that is a real optimistic thing that I think we ought to have while we confront the challenges of trained terrorists being imported into South America. That people are literally modifying tanks in our own hemisphere so that they may be more available for invasion of a fellow country. I mean, these are challenges that we've got to go. People looking at ways to be able to supersede the Constitution and extend their authority, if not through electoral process, but through civil intimidation. All of these are realities that we have down there. But I just want to thank you very much for being able to get together this morning and talk about this, because I think that all around America we need to talk more about this. That there are spheres of influence that we need to address. And I, as one, have to say, Africa is not our backyard. Europe should be taking a lead there. We should be supporting them, but we should not be the lead agency there. That's not our backyard. Asia is very important, but it's not our backyard. We should not be the lead agency there. We should be supporting. But our own hemisphere, this is where we should take the lead. We should be putting the emphasis on. And this is where other power bases should support us in this hemisphere. And we should be working one-on-one, first-person relationships with our neighbors to the south, and make sure that this hemisphere has the ability to have that dialogue and for that attention, rather than it being a backwater political and social and news media aspect, that it should be the front page of every politician's speech and the front page of every newscast. And sadly, that's not true right now. And until we do that, the threats that exist in our own hemisphere are not going to be addressed in appropriate manner. But this is a step, and I want to thank you very much for allowing us to participate.